Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the September 20th, 2022 council meeting. I would ask that you please ensure that your phones are on silent mode, and as a reminder, our meetings are web streamed and televised. With that, I will call the meeting to order. We do have a few changes to the agenda. There's an addition, item 6.3, that is the deputation for Tom O'Hara and Eldon Darbison. A slide deck has been provided and will be added to the post-meeting agenda. Deletions, deputations, Hetty Majard, staff report OPS 22-047, and Erica Bailey regarding OPNPL 2022119 and ZNPL 2022120. Staff report OPS 22-047 regarding the draft forestry bylaw. Replacements due to clerical errors. We have staff report regarding CD 22-077, staff report regarding CD 22-083, bylaw 30-Z-2022, and bylaw 29Z-2022. Are there any other changes or additions to the agenda? Councillor Rabbits, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you. I did want to pull item 5.9 from the consent. I want to make sure we're talking about the same corrections. I noticed an error with regards to parking that I want to address.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from everyone? Okay, seeing none then, if I could have a mover to approve the agenda as amended. Councillor Shelley, thanks. Seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? Thank you. Any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Councillor Van Passen, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a deemed conflict on item 4.2 from the Public Hearings Committee minutes on report CD 22-076.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That is noted. We have no early closed session items today. We do have 9 items of consent. Councillor Rabbits, thanks for pulling item 5.9. Any other items? And if with that, then Councillor Rabbits, I'm going to start with you first, and then we'll just approve them as the bunch, just if that's all right.
Okay, through you. I'm on page 138 of our large agenda package. And when we're looking at the revised parking rates, I just want to make sure all the figures were correct, because there is a misquote that there would be a reduction of approximately 135,175 spaces. So we just go to staff to see if that was correct in the bylaw, or also if we need to amend the report.
Through the mayor, that is on the addendum agenda. That page has been updated. There was a hyphen missing in the report. The bylaw is correct. So that page has been updated in the addendum agenda. So it's 135-175 spaces on that page.
Okay, thank you. And through you, with that, I just wanted to make sure all those parking figures were correct. I would have liked to see a little bit more parking on that space. I'm not sure if that can be addressed through site plan control. I did see there was some additional green space that perhaps would have required less maintenance. We could have got a few more parking spaces into that slot, perhaps even some expanded accessible parking units. But you know, reserving those comments, I'd be happy to approve staff's recommendation if you need a motion to approve that.
Through the mayor, we can take that under advisement, and the applicant is here about the site plan. It is a balance of the green space of the amenity area versus the parking. The zoning is the minimum, so as long as that's clear, this is like the minimum threshold. So there could potentially be some more if there was demand and need for more. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Rabbits. I'm just going to approve all the items together then if you don't have any other further issues with that. So with that, if I could have a mover to approve consent items 5.1 to 5.9 as they are printed on your agenda. Councillor Rabbits, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Vanden Rishi. All those in favor? And that's carried. We have 2 deputations today. I would ask council to accept the deputations for information after each speaker. Should committee wish to direct staff to bring back a report on any of the matters for further discussion, that can occur following the deputations. Deputation 6.2 is an agent who is available for their specific item. 6.2 is in regards to application ZNP 2022197 for 4671 Highway 3 in Renton. So this item, of course, was just approved on consent, and therefore the deputation, I'm assuming, will no longer be required unless you still wish to speak. Okay, thanks. 6.3, moving on then, we have Tom O'Hara and Eldon Darbison with G. Douglas Valley Limited regarding the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 750 Old Highway 24 in Waterford, and that's related to staff report CD 22-087. You guys have a slide presentation as well, yeah?
We do, yes. It was sent to the clerks. I'm something. I do have it on thumb drive as well. Perfect. So firstly, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank council for having the opportunity to speak today. I'm here obviously to speak about the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for Orchard Square in Waterford. Next slide, please. My name is Scott Palandre. I'm a project planner with G. Douglas Valley, and I'm the agent acting on behalf of Flip Verlindia Homes and Tom O'Hare. With me is my colleague, Eldon Darbison. Next slide, please. So the proposed site plan, as you see in front of you, is for the site in Waterford. The staff report does indicate that the proposal is for 55 units. It must be noted that through negotiation and then consultation with neighbors, it has been agreed upon that the condominium development could be established on the property. This staff recommendation could potentially sterilize any viable or feasible development on the lands. The staff proposal, and finally, the staff proposal was not discussed adequately with the applicant, and it needs to be made clear that the unverified development concept from the staff recommendation is not what the applicant has applied for. Next slide, please. Through the planning process, staff has come to light there are 2 staff primary concerns: maintaining commercial use on the lands and appropriate setbacks from vacant industrial lands across Old Highway 24. Next slide, please. I'll be dealing with the commercial aspect first. Through the public consultation process, it was made clear by the In-Subdivision Development Action Committee they do not wish to see commercial development on this property. This was confirmed in an email sent to planning staff on September 16th. Secondly, and next point, please. Anecdotally, there does not appear to be a huge demand for commercial development as there are vacant commercial properties and space across Norfolk County. Next point, please. From a developer standpoint, this site presents some challenges: an unfriendly development site with a complicated dual zoning and dual official plan. We believe that the proposal does clean up this site and does present a neighborhood-friendly and economically feasible development. We do believe that the staff proposal does aggravate this issue. Next slide, please. In May of 2021, the applicant had a report completed that indicated that due to existing residential lands surrounding the vacant industrial land, any future industrial use on the land would be limited in accordance with the Ministry of Environment's D6 guidelines, and therefore recommended a 20-meter setback from any future industrial development. In November of 2021, this report was reviewed by staff, and they agreed with the recommendations. With this understanding in mind, the applicant began the detailed design and began to design the actual specific details for the site plan. It should be noted that the industrial development can still occur on these vacant lands. However, due to existing residential land use, it would be required to implement mitigation measures under the environmental compliance approvals process. The proposed residential development does not further aggravate this issue, as industrial development could still occur. Next slide, please. Fast forwarding, we now have a different interpretation of how those D6 guidelines are applied. However, if we can take a step back from the more technical D6 requirements and just take a look at the current land use planning in Waterford. And as you can see, it doesn't make sense to have a very large industrial swath of land that protrudes through existing commercial and residential lands throughout Waterford. From a very basic and general standpoint, is this an appropriate location for industrial facilities in Waterford? Next slide, please. So the first point, obviously the applicant has taken public consultation very seriously through this process. They've engaged with members of the public and in particular members of the In-Subdivision Development Action Committee. They've conducted both working groups, public information sessions, and met with the committee one-on-one and to agree on a number of issues that were brought forward as part of their concerns. Through the engagement and negotiation process, the developer has been able to come to an agreement on a number of issues, including the proposed site plan as presented in the slides today. Overall, the In-Subdivision Development Action Committee has provided their support for the development, and it's questionable whether the same could be said for what's being proposed in the staff report. Next slide, please. Overall, we kindly request that council consider the applicant's proposal as submitted and as negotiated with members of the public and the Subdivision Development Action Committee. It's important to note that the applicant does not, nor do they support the staff alternative as presented in the report. I can answer any questions and the applicant here himself.
Thanks very much. Councilor Martin, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, members of the staff and members of the public.
Sorry, Tom, I just, if we can go back there, I think we had a question from council members. We'll take the questions as they go.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple questions. So I would just like to get some clarity. You briefly stated 55 units down to 47 units, and that was agreed upon. Is your statement alluding to that that's agreed upon with the community group and staff?
With the community group, that was negotiated through the working groups and the public consultation.
Okay, and then that community group consists of the group that we received the petition from back concerning your public meeting?
I believe so, yes. There's a list. They had formed an action committee and presented a petition to council.
Okay, thank you. And then last question. So the slide said November 21 staff agreed with your proposal. Can you elaborate on that?
So the draft report was presented to county staff, and that was prior to undertaking the more detailed design, working through the actual site itself and engaging with members of the public. We wanted to make sure that we weren't premature in our process going forward. We do have confirmation from staff that the report was received and the recommendations were agreed upon.
Okay, thanks. My other questions will go to staff then.
Go ahead, Councillor Huffman. Sorry, Huffman, just one sec. So I'm confused what's going on here. My understanding was you guys were both presenting together as the applicant. You get 5 minutes. So was there some additional presentation that was coming forward?
Through the mayor, I can't speak to that, but if we've erred, then council can approve the second submission. I would have to look and see how the deputation request came in.
Go ahead, Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, through you to Scott. My question, I have a couple questions. One is the reduction from 55 to 47. Was there any consideration in terms of expanding the 20-meter setback?
Through the mayor, so the setback came from the analysis from our D6 study, and then The additional setback from Highway 24 was to provide buffering and a more aesthetic pleasing look along Highway 24. So we based our site design based off the recommendations of the D6 study, and then obviously consultation with the general public.
My next question is, when you're referring to make sure that I'm clear on understanding this, you're referring to the lands to the west of Old 24 that are zoned industrial. Your sense is that that zoning not be there because it would then involve an industrial development right across from residential housing.
So in accordance through the mayor, so in accordance with the D6 study, their recommendation was that due to existing residential development on the opposite side of Blue Line, on the westerly side of Blue Line, those lands are already constrained by any D6 requirements and would be required to undergo mitigation measures. And it's not to say that a class 2 could not be established. Obviously, these are guidelines that the ministry has. Mitigation measures can be implemented, and the applicant themselves have obviously, in accordance with the D6 study, have agreed to some noise mitigation measures, including construction methods of all units will have air conditioning and triple pane windows, at least on the ones fronting onto 20 or closest to Highway 24. And then, so for future industrial development on those lands, they would have to undergo an environmental compliance approvals process, which would require them to have implementation of a bunch of mitigation measures depending on their actual operation itself due to the existing residential development in the area. Now, to say is that swath of land completely inappropriate, I'm not quite sure that's exactly what we're trying to say. I think the big point is that there's already existing residential development and more sensitive land uses in the area, and it's already constrained. The proposal does not further constrain those industrial lands.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, I know from the staff report that they don't support the necessity of a left-hand turn lane. Is this something that's been discussed further with the developer and with your end?
So regarding the necessity of a left-hand turn lane, obviously our traffic impact study, traffic will increase, but not to negatively affect traffic operations in the area. So we'll be looking to our traffic consultant to further advise on that, given the time between when that more proposal came forward for a left-hand turn lane. We'd have to look at that further.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions? Okay, thanks very much. So Tom, I'm just going to remind you have 5 minutes. I let that one go a little longer. I thought you were together, but we're supposed to be presenting new information here.
I'll be short and sweet. So, good afternoon, Mayor and Council, staff, and members of the public. First of all, the land was for sale for 11 years before we purchased it. In follow-up to Scott's presentation, we worked for 18 months and felt that we had direction from planning to proceed with our plans and the plan that you have in front of you in your package. I simply want to read out the communication that Councillor Martin referred to, and this is from Mohammed Alam to Scott. It says, please accept my sincere apology for the late reply on this. We reviewed the D6 compatibility study for proposed townhouse development at Lamb Boulevard and Old Highway 24. Overall, we agree with the recommendation provided in the report and believe that this document is sufficient for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications. During the site plan stage, we'll work with you to further scrutinize the recommended mitigation measures to appropriate design standards such as design type of fencing, building facades, windows, details, and landscape buffer. Sincerely, Mohammed. You know, we've had unprecedented communication with the Yin subdivision. We held a community meeting when we didn't have to, and we had approximately 65 people come from all over the community, not just Yin. You know, we did negotiate in good faith with the Yin subdivision. We reduced the density from 55 to 47, exceeded the parking requirements, and we've got a great mix of bungalows, family town, stacked entry apartments. That really is, and I remember Councillor Taylor, I remember Councillor Huffman, and I believe that Councillor Robbins as well was pleased that we're going to provide some attainable housing, and these are going to be under 400,000. And so we think, again, that's unprecedented. But, you know, so our request is for R4 zoning for the entire site. We do not support what came from planning. And really, we saw that for the first time when we got the council package at 6 p.m. Friday evening. Thank you.
Any questions for Tom? Councillor Hoffman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, through you. Tom, I'm just going to ask you a couple of the questions that I asked Scott so I can get a different perspective. I did meet with the a portion of the Subdivision Action Committee yesterday. They do still have a few issues after reading the planning report. And I was wondering if you could speak to this. They're talking about increased buffering. They are concerned about the 20-meter setback and looking at it as and I'm concerned, I guess, in terms of the gateway to Norfolk County coming from the south into Waterford. So I was wondering if you could speak to those, and then I've got a couple other comments or questions.
Sorry, what was the first one, Councillor Huffman?
The buffering.
So we did do buffering along the east side between the existing homes, but through the site plan approval, if we have to beef that up, that's not a problem. I mean, it's just vegetation. Certainly the 20-meter setback,
does not support any type of commercial development in that area. My next question is, would you be, well, and I guess this would be to staff as well, but moving forward, would it be an issue if a member of that committee was part of the site plan review from your end?
not a problem. You know, we've been very open with the development subcommittee or committee, and you know, we've had meetings back and forth with them, and you know, to show them what our plans are with a site plan, we'd be more than pleased to include them.
And my last question is, in regards to the traffic study, there are still some concerns. There's concerns all over Waterford in regards to some increase in traffic that we've been experiencing. I think things were kind of quiet there for a bit with COVID, but things are ramping up again and people heading back to work, etc. So do you have any thoughts as to, with the traffic study, that there could possibly be a desire to have Old 24 widened a bit with a left-hand turn lane?
Well, I guess we respect the traffic study, but I've lived next door to the piece of land for the last 2 years. As you're well aware, I live in a log home next door. And so I go walking most mornings, and I've actually sat and watched the amount of time that people have had to wait during rush hour, 8 to 9, and then from 4 to 6. And it's never more than 30 seconds to a minute. This isn't Toronto rush hour. We're not waiting for an hour. We're not waiting 10 lights. You know, if they have to wait a minute, that was a long time. And I've never seen traffic have to wait, or a person have to wait a minute. I think that we're pretty spoiled. We live in a small town. We can, you know, it takes me 2 minutes to drive to work. I'm pretty happy about that. But you know, I think that if a left-hand turning lane is necessary, and if that's proved through the site plan, we're certainly open to it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Further questions from council?
Thanks. Through you, Mayor Chop. Not entirely directly related to this proposal, but how do we encourage more developers to build more homes that are listed under 400,000?
I think we need more land, Councillor. I feel that number one, we've got a lull right now because of the economy, but the fact that there were 120,000 immigrants let into Canada in Q1, we know that people are coming from Toronto here. We know that people are coming. Usually they go from downtown Toronto to Hamilton, Burlington, and then Hamilton, Burlington, Woodstock comes here. You know, so that's not going to stop, and that's not going to slow down. The boomers that are my age, I turned 65 on Friday, and the people my age are wanting to retire soon. I'm not, but some people. I think that more land is the answer. You know, and I think that through the growth study, and we've got a good start on that. Brandon Sloan has promised that he'll be bringing something to Mayor and Council in 2023, and so we look forward to that.
Well, land is one problem, water is another.
And
Wastewater would be the third.
And Mayor and Council are working on that as well. You know, so we're happy with that. I mean, we're in a pretty good state in Waterford right now. Even if our big development comes on board, we're good for the first 2 phases. You know, so that we have 8 or 10 years to wait, and it gives council time to you know, develop water and wastewater in a coordinated effort.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the 2 deputations information. Councillor Huffman, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That's carried. Any questions for staff at this point, or do we want to just wait and do the report later on in the report? Thanks. In that case, we will be moving on. All those, Councillor Huffman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I just have a question. Just wondering why it's taking so long for the Norfolk County Public Library Board minutes to come to us.
Through the mayor to Councillor Huffman, we will make some inquiries and provide some feedback back to council through email.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Council minutes, approval of the minutes. So we have 8.1 council minutes from August the 11th. Are there any errors or omissions? Okay, seeing none, then if I could have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes as presented. Councillor Michelle, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That's carried. Reports of committee. We have 2 reports of committee under this section of the agenda. Councillor Van Passen has requested to pull Resolution 3 from the Public Hearings Committee minutes to be voted on separately, as he declared a possible pecuniary interest on that item. Does any councillor member wish to pull any other items from the council minutes? Okay, in that case, unless there's any other errors or omissions, if I could have a motion to approve the remainder of the Public Hearing Committee minutes and the Council Committee minutes as presented. Moved by Councillor Huffman, seconded by Councillor Rabbits. All those in favor? That's carried. Councillor Van Passen will refrain from voting on the next resolution as he declared a possible pecuniary interest on the matter during the Public Hearings Committee meeting. If I could have a mover and a seconder for or an alternate motion, I should say, that staff report CD 22-076 for development applications at NPL 2022-151 be received for information, and further that any comments received as part of the statutory public meeting be considered in a future recommendation staff report. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Vanden Riche, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? And that is carried. Reports of advisory committees, that's item 10, 2 reports of committee under this section of the agenda. 10.1 Special Agricultural Advisory Board meeting minutes from August 23rd, 2022. Any councillor member wish to discuss any items from that meeting? Okay. Moving on, 10.2 Health and Social Services minutes, June 27th, 2022. Any councillor member wish to pull any items from that discussion? In that case, if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the following reports of committee for information. Special Agricultural Advisory Board meeting minutes, August 23rd, 2022, and Health and Social Services minutes from June 27th, 2022. Mover and seconder, Councillor Michelle, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried, and we will go back over to Brandon now for the discussion on the file we just discussed. That's 11.2.1, the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 750 Old Highway 24 in Waterford, which relates to report CD 22-087.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. So the primary consideration before you today on this application is the appropriateness of changing the land use on the north portion of the site from commercial to residential. Staff have two main concerns or considerations with this file, and we haven't been able to find resolution at this time. So that's why before you have the staff recommendation, and you also have attached the applicant or developer's proposed bylaws as well. The items I would say in response to the deputation, from my perspective, these are items that I've wanted addressed since the public hearing committee. And I know there's been comments since the pre-consultation about some of these items as well. First item, compatibility and protection of the unbuilt industrial site across the street, and also to have an appropriate transition from what could be or is industrial to a sensitive use of residential. To have a buffer and a transition between those uses. We don't necessarily fully agree with the consultant report. There are a number of items that, in our opinion, weren't sufficiently addressed as it relates to the potential for a Class 2 industrial facility that could locate under the existing zoning for that site. We've noted those questions for quite a while. So really, this has to relate to the front portion of the site within 70 meters of that site across the street. There is a generous road allowance and future widening that might be needed. So really, it starts to narrow down in the amount of distance. It is a provincial guideline. There is a technical study that the applicant believes indicates and proves that it's sufficient. We've consulted with the ministry. We still have concerns. It could basically result in some infringement upon that industrial site. Could be more difficult for a landowner to cite an employment use on that property. If you recall, there's also a subdivision proposed at Blue Line and Thompson, and that is looking at a 70-meter buffer between industrial and residential. It's the same principle. Just in this case, that industry already exists. In this site, the industry doesn't exist yet. The second item is the loss of one of our last two vacant commercial sites in all of Waterford, zone sites. And we have, as you know, an application for the north of Lamb Boulevard site. So these are the last two service commercial sites. We know that Waterford's growing, more residents. There's going to be, at some point in time, some demand for commercial services, particularly could be on this side of town. There may be opportunities on the north side of town, depending on how the future planning goes there. Of course, we have a great downtown, but on the south side, these are the last sites. There is the potential for some form of development. We've looked at whether or not there could be a mix of use. Ultimately, Mohammed is going to present a few concepts if that helps for now. I just wanted to address, and I'm not sure about the approach of the deputation, but from my perspective, it was very clear that staff had meetings with the consultant and the applicant about these two topics for many months, many times. And we've outlined the concerns, we've outlined them in writing, and it's been provided. And with all due respect, we tried to work together as planning colleagues and professionals to see what we could do to find a resolution and talk through the matter. And at some point in time, you do get a bit of a disagreement on the approach of what will come, or a bit of a gray area. I will say the applicant has done a wonderful job of meeting with the applicants, the residents that are in the surrounding area. They've been at that for a long period of time. They've gone above and beyond. They've kept staff informed of that, although we may not have had as much review up front, but they did provide us with that information. We're aware of the comments from the community. And also they are looking at housing, which is a big need in our community. So with that introduction, I'll just ask Mohammed, who I believe is on the line. He just has a few visuals to show the staff concern about the corner, and then one possible option, and then we're available for questions. Please go ahead, Mohammed, if
Thanks, Brandon. Through Madam Chair to the Council, if you can see the screen, which shows a red line area, mostly at the corner, at the intersection of Old Highway 24 and Lamb Boulevard. So that's the area of concern from a STR's perspective. And you can also see the distance shown in this figure, 70 meters from the other side of the road, which is the vacant land at this moment, industrial zone and designated protected industrial area. So that's what the staff concern had, and I think we raised this issue from the very beginning, even from the pre-consultation meeting when we provided our concern about the D6 separation distance. As Brandon already mentioned, we consulted with the ministry also, and they provided similar interpretation of our comments. And that's where our main concern is. The other aspect of is, as Brandon already mentioned, about the loss of commercial use in this area. We identified in our report that we are having a very limited commercial area in Waterford, which is around 3.1% only for the whole urban area. And for the service commercial zone, we have only 1.8% of the whole Waterford urban area. If we lose these commercial lands from block 61, which is we are showing on this slide, and block 60, which is the northern side of this land, then we'd probably have less than 1% of service commercial zone and no vacant service commercial zone in Waterford to be developed. So altogether, we identified that if we can have that separate 70-meter separation distance, we can still at least keep some commercial development. And also from the very beginning, from the pre-consultation, we mentioned that we are open to have some sort of mixed-use development if the D-series guidelines can be satisfactorily addressed. So in this sketch, we are showing a conceptual idea how that can be feasible with this land, where you have a small commercial development, can be a mixed use also, at the corner of Lamb Boulevard and Highway 24, whereas most of the part of the development is still townhouse developments as proposed. In this concept, we identified that they can still have 43 townhouse units compared to 47 townhouse units that we just received in September 13th. That was not actually identified earlier, and the proposed zoning bylaw doesn't also address that. But I think still it is close to 47 and can still have commercial development at the corner where the staff has concern. That's all from my side. If you have any questions, let me know, please.
Thanks very much, Mohammed and Brandon. Questions, Councillor Huffman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through you, my question, I just wanted to clarify, Mohammed. So you're saying that right now the developer is citing going down from 55 to 47 units, and you're saying that with this, and that's with a 20-meter setback, you're saying with the 70-meter setback, they would be able to achieve 43 units. Is that correct?
True, Madam Chair, to the councillor, yes, that is correct. If I show the previous slide, which is the most recent version, the applicant provided on September 13th, that shows 47 townhouse units, including parking spaces at the front, even at the corner, which I believe is still the committee has concern of. And if we go to the commercial zone at the corner, that concept still shows 43 units with the commercial at the corner with more landscape features or buffer area at the front, at the corner.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is, what is the size of the lot to the north?
So, Madam Chair, Councillor, can you repeat the question again?
Yes, what's the size of the other commercial lot just to the north of Lamb Boulevard?
Approximately, it would be similar as this one. I don't have the accurate area, but it would be similar area like the commercial zone we have here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just through the mayor, it's approximately 1.7 acres.
That's it for now.
Okay, further questions? Councillor Columbus, go ahead.
So I heard that staff has been communicating with municipal affairs on this. And if council does not agree with staff's thinking, where does this go? Does it go to the Ontario Municipal Board? Brandon?
Through the mayor, depending upon the decision, there's a number of parties that could appeal the decision. The applicant, anyone that's been a deputation, written or oral in writing, and so there's a number of residents that have done that through the process, or the municipality.
Even though there's a number from the Yins subdivision committee that have softened on this whole proposal. Is that right?
Through the mayor, I don't know if I'm the best to totally address that because I have not specifically talked to that group myself. I'm not sure if Mohammed has, but the applicant is indicating that that committee is on board. We have a number of items in writing from that group that they're on board. I do not know if they represent every resident or stakeholder that's commented on this file.
Thank you.
Councillor Roberts, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you to Brandon. We had some conversation about your team being in disagreement with some of the consultants' report or some of their information. And I wanted to drill down on exactly maybe some specifics of what those areas of disagreement were. Something I'm interested in is I'm looking into the D6 setbacks, and it's that image there, the red and the purple. And there's also some information with regards to noise and noise setbacks. So I wouldn't mind you walking us through those two images. One's on page 381, the one's on 383. And is there any other areas in those consultants' reports that there was major disagreement of the information presented?
Through the mayor, I'll try and address a few of those matters, and Mohammed may want to chime in as well. So there's a number of items that we discussed with the applicant. Their consultant is an expert in the matter. So they're an engineer, I presume, that is qualified to do this work. Staff are planning staff. The MOE guideline is something that land use planners do get involved in. I've had quite a bit of involvement in my former municipality. I had a lot of industrial land under consideration, so I've been through this many years. And our question comes down to a number of items that are in that report and a little bit about the graphic, I suppose. The graphic shows a 70-meter distance that has kind of a reddish color, we'll call it, in the legend on page 381 of the package. And I think what they're identifying is through that is that there are a couple existing residential dwellings that happen to be within that distance on the west side. And so that may be a limiting factor, possibly on that west side of the property. I'm not quite sure on the east side of the property if that is a limiting factor, as the lands along there are either undeveloped or they're commercial currently. So there's no compatibility issue. A lot of it came down to the class 2 facility. For a class 1 facility, which is like a lighter industrial, could be storage, could be just something that doesn't involve too much trucking or emissions. The right of way works. There's enough distance on Old Highway 24 that there's enough separation. And so it's really a noise, dust, odor, etc. issue if there's anything that would have a higher amount of trucking, industry, or any of those emissions that might occur. It puts it into a class 2 facility. And there's only a chance that could happen. There's a probability that someone under the current zoning could build with that a class 1 facility and everything's okay. But there's also a chance right now it's zoned and someone could do a class 2 facility. And in my experience, the protection of industrial sites is pretty important. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's paramount over housing. but it's definitely a consideration about protecting your employment lands. And so if we infringed upon that 70 meters, it would thus reduce the amount that's on that industrial site of where and what could be built. The applicant is indicating that there's enough room on that site that they could still build something. It just might limit their trucking area, their access, their parking, or some of the floor space, but there's enough room that they could still build outside of the 70 meters. To us, that's a bit of an infringement. The other item that we had a little bit of a discrepancy about is where that 70 meters is measured from. And we believe it's from the zone line or property line and not necessarily a building setback line. That's what we followed up with the ministries about, including MOE. And I believe, as Mohammed indicated, they've confirmed our read interpretation is how they would view it as well. Could probably get into a little bit further, but I've gone on for a while, so hopefully that suffices.
Thank you, and through you, that does suffice. I guess just from a layperson's perspective, I see that the 70 meter buffer, it cuts right through the westerly portion of the zone and into what's currently residential. And so I guess my question is, why would staff be proposing just to stop at the corner and not extending it the length of the zone?
Through the mayor, just for a bit of clarity as well, there are two existing dwellings there. It's not zone residential on the west side of Blue Line. It is designated for future urban residential. At some point, it was determined that was appropriate. It's currently in the holding pattern of a D zone. So it's designated but not zoned. And so it's similar to the lands just to the north of that. If you extend this line to the north, there's a plan of subdivision with the same designation, same current D zone that's proposed to go residential, but is looking at a 70 meter buffer to the industrial along Blue Line Road.
Thanks very much for your questions about that, Councillor Rabbits. Brandon, how much industrial land do we have in Norfolk County left?
To the mayor, there is 0 Norfolk County controlled industrial land left in the county. There is vacant land that is designated and in some cases zoned in certain areas. In Waterford, there is not much left. This is pretty much, I think, the last vacant parcel of industrial land in Waterford, but if we stand to be corrected.
So there's no Norfolk County owned industrial land left. There are some swaths in Waterford, which is one of the few spots that we have water. If we look at Waterford and Delhi, this is, you're saying, the only piece of industrial land that's left available.
To the mayor, I'm just double checking and looking at the map now. There is one other parcel that may be its own property. To me, it looked like it was all part of one piece, but there is one other parcel. And then
So one, possibly two, but the point is extremely minimal. So I guess in some situations you made the comment about, you would necessarily put industrial lands as paramount over housing, which I would tend to agree if we actually had industrial lands, but we don't really have much in the way of industrial land. So protecting the bit that we do have, I think, actually is paramount. I actually would commend staff. When I look at this proposal, I just sent Teresa a message to see if she could get Mohammed to put the other proposal up side by side. And when we talk about good planning decisions, protecting some of that commercial use, building out Waterford, protecting the industrial lands, I think that's what staff has strived to do. I realize it's easier for developers just to focus on residential housing than to deal with commercial space. But that's not what builds complete communities down the road. So I think that staff has come up with a more than reasonable compromise. And certainly if I would be able to move the staff recommendation, that's what I would be supporting. I think that, in the context, we do have to be careful when, consultants' reports are saying you don't need as much of a buffer when the consultant has actually been hired by the applicant to potentially achieve that recommendation. So I think that this is a good example of good planning decisions that is building out a community, that is looking at protecting commercial lands, that's looking at protecting industrial lands, and helps to build the future of Waterford. And it's not just a massive housing. So I commend staff. Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been trying to figure out how to formulate this into a question to staff, but the same issue I brought up a couple of months ago about an applicant brought forth his application, staff made a recommendation that was not something the applicant wanted. And, I, for one, refuse to approve an application that is not what the applicant asked for. So, how do we go back and say either we can approve the original application, we can deny it, we can defer it, but what's the point of approving an application and then you're going to have the applicant themselves appealing that to the OLT? That just makes no sense. So I can understand both parts of this argument. I think when we discussed this last time, I am sort of opposed to any residential development there. There's a reason that it was laid out that way. We have the industrial, the commercial is the buffer between the industrial and the residential. But, that plan was laid out. Maybe enough things have changed in the time frame. We are looking at a review of Waterford sort of plan in the next year. Maybe there's a possibility to create some industrial land areas in another spot, take the area that's now commercial.
Can I turn that into a question for you, Brandon? Unless the owner agreed to remove the industrial designation on their piece of lands, would the county be able to do that and move it elsewhere? Or is zoning not as of right on that piece of property?
To the mayor, through the mayor, the existing designation and zoning of that industrial property is as of right. We could, in the future, go through a comprehensive process to do a plan whereby proposed land use is different than what's there now. The owner, of course, would be able to comment as part of that and could appeal or not appeal that process in the future.
So the next question in terms of, I'm hearing a big monologue here, but I'm looking for some questions. So the next question is in terms of approving an application. We do that all the time when applications come to council. In fact, I just recall in Simcoe, we approved the application provided they put in the additional parking spaces. So that's the purpose of bringing the application to council. And so staff is presenting what they are recommending. If you wish to move an alternative, you can do so. But we can also approve an application, correct, Brandon, that is not as the applicant would like. Is that correct?
To the mayor, that is correct. Of course, there's potential legal implications. So the applicant, of course, could appeal that like they could any application that's different than the decision.
But ultimately, this application is put forward, or the proposal put forward by staff that you're looking for approval on. In your view, this meets the definition of which you would argue of a good planning decision that protects industrial land, protects those commercial lands, while at the same time providing the developer with a significant number of homes to be able to construct.
To the mayor, Mohammed and I probably would agree, and based on a report, that what staff's putting forward more fully is consistent with all of the PPS, provincial policy statement, and would have a little bit more conformity with our official plan, and is good planning, and we feel a good balance.
Sometimes it's a long road for a developer as well to go and appeal something that in reality actually represents good planning. So do you have any further questions for us?
Well, Madam Mayor, those were the questions I was going to ask. That since we are looking at a review of the policies, that it is possible to change those in the future. It is possible to designate other lands as industrial. All those things are possible.
With owners' consent.
Same rights of appeal with those landowners. And, I go back to what I said, couple months ago, it's pretty hard to show up at OLT when you have both the neighbors and the applicant themselves arguing with the municipality. It's nice to get 2 out of 3 on board. And I don't think we have that here, because I think one of our deputations already told us that they are not in acceptance of staff proposal. That's why I asked those questions, so that possibly we could look at deferring this to have a bit more discussion between the applicant and staff, as we did in the other one, where we at least got 2 sides on board agreeing on something. Thank you.
Is there some comments from the public in relation to staff's plan? I struggle how that the public would be opposed to staff's proposal, but would be in support of the developer's proposal. Councillor Huffman, if you have
Not
comments on that.
everyone is a member of that Yin subdivision group that's been meeting, and we have a list of other comments that's part of the package here.
Councillor Huffman, go ahead.
I just wanted to move forward on what Councillor Van Passen mentioned, and I would second a deferral.
Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? With that, we will move on to our next report. That's 11 point. Actually, you know what? Let's take a 5-minute break here. We'll come back at 2:05. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I've just learned that this file actually is past the time for us to have made a decision. So in speaking with the clerk, she has a few comments that she would like to make to council.
So through the mayor, thank you to council. So I apologize. I was busy multitasking instead of listening before the break, and you deferred a motion without any clarity on when you were deferring it to or the reason you were deferring it. So would like some clarity on that matter. I also advise council that should they wish to reconsider that decision they just made, that they can do it through a proper reconsideration motion. If you're not looking to reconsider, then I just need that clarity for staff and for the minutes of when we're deferring the matter to and for what purpose, please.
At the same time, could we just get some clarity from planning staff in terms of the timelines for the requirement for a decision?
To the mayor, my understanding is we have surpassed that legislative time frame, and Mohammed just confirmed that's correct for a decision.
So by failing to make a decision today and having a decision on record, then it does open it up. It's already been opened up to go to the tribunal, and this just prolongs it.
To the mayor, that's
Even more.
correct.
Okay, so does somebody wish to provide that clarity, or does somebody wish to move for reconsideration on the matter to make a decision today? Councillor Hoffman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, through you. So my question is, the reason I seconded the deferral is that I felt that we were kind of getting nowhere. Obviously, the fact that it's ready for OLT does throw another wrench into the plans. My issue was what I was hoping to do, and I'll be very upfront with what I would like to see. I was hoping to see some negotiation so that we could look at a 70-meter setback to preserve those industrial lands. These commercial lands have been available for a long time. Nothing's happened. So looking at the residential piece. So a little bit from part A and a little bit from part B. That's what I was hoping for.
So can I just jump in here? Because I think we were after two different things then, which is going to be, so Councillor Van Passen was looking for some sort of settlement that was more in line with the developers, which was full blocks of housing right along that road. And yourself, you were in fact looking for even more than what staff was willing to propose. Is that correct?
I was looking for the 70 meters because I've been working with, as a counselor, I've been working and discussing things with the developer and also with the community group. The 70-meter setback is very important to the community group in terms, and also the no commercial for the community group. Those are the two pieces that were vital to them.
Brandon, did you have some comments you wanted to make on the setback? No? Okay. I think that we need to make a decision here. If it's going ahead with the deferral, I think there's two conflicting directions here that you're wanting to direct staff in. So Councillor Van Passen, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I don't think you need to jump to conclusions on what I think the end result should be, because I don't think there should be houses there at all, but that's a whole different discussion. My thought was that we had a deputation earlier. The applicants only saw the staff recommendation on Friday. They haven't really had enough time to look at it. And if we could put forth the motion to reconsider that, I'd be happy to amend the deferral to be brought back to the next council meeting, which I think is October 5th, and just give a couple of weeks for the staff and the applicant to sit down and see if there is that mutual ground, so that a report could come back that at least we have agreement between staff. And if there's no agreement between staff and the developer, so be it. They bring back the report, we'll vote on it. But let's at least give the staff and the applicant a week or two to see if there is enough common ground and enough the financial feasibility would be there to get staffs what they're recommending, but the developer gets what they want as well. So if I think Councillor Huffman, did you put forth a motion to reconsider that? I would second that, but.
Teresa, go ahead.
Through the mayor, if we're just clarifying when the matter is deferred to a reconsider isn't needed, I can just amend that because the intent was to defer it. I just should have clarified when you wanted it deferred to. The reconsideration would be if you are looking to make a different decision than deferring the matter.
And so I guess the question remains, Brandon, if the applicant decides to proceed to the Land Planning Tribunal between now and October the 5th, since we failed to make a decision today, where does that leave us?
To the mayor, you can probably get legal advice from someone other than myself, since I'm not legal staff. But essentially, if that was to happen before a council decision, the planning, the municipal planning opinion is already on paper in writing. So whether or not how it would proceed in terms of planning staff's representation, there just wouldn't be a council decision. But the OLT, irrespective, I guess, of council decisions these days and age, can make their decision based on the rules and procedures that they have.
Councilor Hoffman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through you, would it be appropriate? I just want to make sure before I put it out there that we get a confirmation that this would not be brought forth to the OLT prior to October 5th.
I don't think we can really do that, but I like where your thinking is, but I'm sure the applicant will be coming forward with other applications to Norfolk County Council in the future. Councilor Van Passen, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And maybe I'm naive, but I think we have a developer here who's been around for a while, a member of the community and all that. And I do have some faith that they won't take it to the OLT before the 5th because of the late decision, because even if we make a decision, they can take it to the OLT because they disagree with the decision. So it's just a matter of how it gets there. So let's, I have the confidence, the faith in them that they'll sit down and talk to our staff. And if they can't come to agreement on the 5th, we'll make a decision one way or the other. And it'll end up at OLT for whatever reason by someone, I'm sure. So if the clerk is correct, can we just amend that motion to defer it and be brought back to the next council meeting and not have to go through the reconsideration process?
Through the mayor, if council's in agreement with that, I'll just amend it to the October 5th.
Okay, moving on to staff reports. 11.3.1, that's EIS 22-069, the J.A. Smith Drain consideration of contract price budget amendment. The order of business for consideration of contract price. First of all, there's advise on notification and authority. All affected owners and agencies have been notified of this meeting in accordance with the Drainage Act requirements. Staff or the engineer may provide an overview of the report. The second will go on to owners' questions, and that will afford anyone in attendance the opportunity to speak to the report under consideration. This would be the opportunity for any affected owner or council member to ask questions of the engineer. Third, we will address the petition signatures. Any owners in attendance who own a property identified on the original petition who wish to remove their names from the petition may do so by affixing their names on the appropriate forms with the clerk to have the forms available. Any owner in attendance who would like to add their name to the petition in favor of the worked proceeding may now do so by affixing their names on the appropriate forms with the clerk. Where lands or roads of the municipality are addressed, council may, by resolution, authorize the head of the municipality to sign the petition in favor of the petition. And I've got a note here that if any names are added or removed from the petition, council must refer to the engineer to confirm if the petition remains valid. If the petition fails, it would end there. And then we will move on to any council resolutions. So with that, Andrew, I will turn it over to yourself for your presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Mayor and councillors. The J.A. Smith Drain Report is in front of you today for a budget amendment and also to recommend the award of the contract. Just so everyone's situated, the J.A. Smith Drain is located near the northwest limits of our county, just to the west of Cortland. And this was initiated through the Drainage Act through petition, 2 separate petitions, one by Townsend Lumber for a new outlet to deal with their drainage issues, and secondly by the Road Authority to obtain legal outlet for ditches and road drainage in that area. Project was tendered and the lowest compliant bid was $66,000, which represents 153% of the estimate. Under the Drainage Act, when pricing is greater than 133% of the estimate, council is required to hold a meeting to allow owners the opportunity to add or remove their names from the petition, and council to consider the petition itself. So as you mentioned earlier, all affected owners have been notified of the meeting happening today, the increase in price, as well as the impact on their assessments. We did talk to Townsend Lumber, and they are not interested in removing their name from the petition. And staff are recommending that we award the contract to the lowest compliant bidder, which is Robert Simon Construction, for a total of $66,000, amending the overall budget to $94,000. And I do have county staff here, our drainage superintendent, as well as our engineer on record for this file, or if there are any questions about the file itself.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Any questions from council? Are you guys here to speak to this report? No, okay. What's that? Okay. So nothing further from council. In that case, if somebody wishes to move the staff recommendation, Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Taylor, all those in favor, that is carried. Moving on to staff report 11.3.3, that's staff report EIS 22-077, the service monitoring report for water and wastewater. Did I skip one? Oh, 11.3.2, I'm so sorry. Jump my page here. Staff report EIS 22-073 regarding the Highway 6 drain consideration of contract price for the budget amendment. And so Andrew, I'll turn that back over to you again.
Sure, and very similar to the last report, just a different order of magnitude. This is the Highway 6 drain report located in Port Dover. Like the last report, recommending a budget amendment and an award of contract. This one was started quite a while ago, back in 2012, and since that time it's gone through all the different stages of the Drainage Act, court revisions and tribunal appeals as well. The petition was jointly submitted by the MTO in Norfolk County to seek adequate outlet for stormwater in that area. And since this petition was initiated, the area continues to be subject to significant erosion, and really the need for work here is quite apparent to staff. Project was tendered. The lowest compliant bid came in at just over $2.2 million, which again represents 139% of the estimate. So much like I said in the last one, if it's greater than 133%, council must hold a meeting to consider this. Again, residents were notified of the price increase, the impact on the assessment, as well as the fact that the meeting is being held today to discuss this. We've also reviewed the bids with our engineer, who is behind me, to confirm that the pricing is in line with what we're seeing for market fluctuations, as well as the conditions of the soil and the bank have continued to erode since the estimate was provided. To support adequate drainage within this watershed and to provide a new outlet for our Port Dover wastewater plant, which is very important, staff are recommending that we award this contract to the lowest compliant bidder, which in this case is Navicon, for a price of $2.25 million, which is about $630,000 over the estimate. This will impact the capital budget, both for the drain project as well as the wastewater plant capital line item. And just like the last one, I have Bill here, our drainage superintendent, as well as our drainage engineer on file, if there's any questions.
Questions from council? Councillor Columbus, go ahead.
I realize this erosion is very severe in that area and taking place. When does this project commence if this passes at this current meeting?
So through the chair, we're just seeking council's approval to award the contract, and if awarded, we'll start construction as soon as possible. So by the time we mobilize, it'll take a few weeks, but certainly we'll be mobilized very quickly to start the work.
Andrew, I'm curious about what clauses we have built into this contract for overages. how is that going to impact not only the residents, but the county? I can tell you, I just so happened to stumble into some concerns with perhaps the design that has been proposed. And I have good faith in the people that I talk to, and I could almost wager that we are going to see overages on this contract at the end of the day. So it's one that I'm going to be monitoring closely, and I just want to know for the what leverage the municipality is going to have in that case.
So through the chair, this is your standard public procurement. So we have gone through the efforts of putting together our detailed specifications. We have worked with the lowest compliant bidder in the past, so we do have experience working with them. Something we would be monitoring very closely as well. A project of this magnitude requires additional project controls to ensure everything remains on time and budget. But I might ask Bill or our colleagues here to speak to the specifics of this particular contract.
I guess if I can add a little bit more, what I want to know is we've talked about our need to improve our, some of our, how do I put this? Our vendor management, tracking those who have come forward. They've done a job for Norfolk County. They're the lowest bidder, but there seems to be all these overages after the fact. And I don't actually see us ever taking any action. And so in this particular instance, it's one that is highlighted to me that I foresee this ballooning even further down the road. So I want to know what we've done to change our process that we've employed in the past, where we really have not gone after contractors that have not remained within their budget, and we just continue to pay out those funds without holding them accountable for that bid that was put in the first place. So I'm just wondering what kind of language we have in this deal, in this contract, that is going to ensure that the lowest compliant bidder is going to remain at that contract price.
So through the chair, within our contract language, certainly on any contract, there is an opportunity for overages. That does not always mean the contractor is not adhering to the original terms and conditions. Things that get found in the field will often alter our overall contract price. That being said, staff do need to monitor the contractor very closely. And since I've joined here, I've been working with our corporate services team, because I was finding that we were doing vendor management, call it after the fact of a contract. That's something that within the language that we have within our contract, we actually can enforce, and we can monitor the performance of a contractor during the actual work. Something that I would say we have not done maybe in the past as strongly as we should have been doing, but it's something that our team is well aware of and looking at to make sure that we do hold the contractor accountable to the price that they have submitted. Again, with the exception that there always is changes in contracts if we come across anything that's unforeseen, but with that aside, we should be adhering to the contract language, and we can vendor manage that contractor accordingly.
I'm going to come back to this, but I'm going to let Councillor Vanden Riche go first.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. In the contract, is there a portion that says something about if you're not on time and you allow them those particular extra days, but then if they continuously are late, is there anything in the contract where there's a payback or there's some sort of penalty clause?
So through the chair, I was just conferring with staff behind me, and in many contracts, we do have liquidated damages that are included, so the county can recoup funds for delays. In this particular contract, there are no LDs.
And the idea of a contractor then comes and says that he has a delay for a particular reason. Is there a method that they have to prove the reason? Like, I mean, we've just been through COVID, and every delay, it seems it's COVID. But now that we're progressively over that, or supply, because due to COVID. So is there anything there in the contract that says you have to give us a little more information why we're in a delay or why we've gone over a cost estimate?
Certainly through the chair, yes, contractor is required to give notice anytime there is a change in either schedule or change in anything that they found within the field. And that's comes to us for approval through our staff as well as the engineer to ensure that things are presented accordingly and that we are supportive of the requested change. So yes, we do have ability to approve those changes.
Teresa, can you just clarify this process here then? So we're
through the mayor, this is the opportunity to allow individuals who may be in attendance to add their name or remove their name from the drain.
And are they allowed to speak to council as we've done in the past with drainage? This is where I'm a bit confused.
So I would suggest that the act suggests that people can remove or add their name to the drain only. So that would be at council's discretion. It doesn't say that we have to provide them an opportunity to speak, but we have in the past.
I'm going to assume you want the opportunity to speak. Can I get a motion from council then to Councillor Martin? Everybody jump at once. Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Columbus. All those in favor? And that's carried and the floor is yours.
Mayor, councilors, my name's Ed Hunter.
We'll get you to say your address for the
I've
clerk.
been playing, you get that? Ed Hunter?
Do you need his address there, Teresa? Or your
I've been playing with this drain for 12 years. I'd like to answer some of your questions. Your question is one thing, will the contractor show up? Is that what you're saying? Well, I met with the contractors. After today, if you pass that lowest bid, they'll be moving their equipment and end on my property tomorrow. They're going to put their building for the guy to run his computer on my hydro right outside on my property. That answers one of your questions. They'd be glad to come. And I apparently have to wait 10 days after this meeting. They're willing to move in tomorrow if you pass it. So getting back to the drain. I've been playing with this drain for 12 years. I owned all the property. I sold you 4 acres on a promise way back 10 years ago. As Amy would know, I have a diary. All of you, I have a picture of all of you. I have every time I called you and every time you didn't call me back. And all the people that showed up at my place. So what I'm trying to say is you have to fix the drain. You cannot delay it. Millie's sitting there. Her property's caving in. You're about this far from her bank. And see, the problem with the whole thing is the drain is under the, what do you call it, big voice and, well, drainage act. I talked to him many times. And the thing is, you were going to put a drain down, a 3-foot pipe down the thing. It could have been done 5 years ago, but you guys delayed it. And that thing went and washed out because you want to run your outlet pipe down at the same time. That's where the problem started. So if you move a pipe off my property, I get to build a house. I benefit. And you also get $10,000 taxes from me. That's a benefit. So I know the prices are up. I can tell you, I've had Chris at my place at least 12 times before he was a counselor. When he was way back in Norfolk County, or the, what was it? City of Nanticoke. So what I'm sitting here for is I think what you should do is just pass this thing and get on with it. Because you're in a no-win situation. Because that's about all. Any questions? I can answer them.
Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Turned off.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor Chop. I think we just found our unofficial project manager to keep the costs down and everything running on schedule. So if we could get him a hard hat, I think we're set to go.
Let's get back on. So when I sold my property here to use, all hell out that let loose. It went downhill. It starts to cave in because I maintained it. I put a culvert in 1 foot and blocked it off so the water couldn't run. And the neighbors across the road, the gated people, came over and tried to stop me from putting the pipe in. It was going down to 3 feet wide, so I made it 1 foot. Then I put a piece of plywood in. I controlled the water. But once I sold it to you, hands off, Eddie. It's not your property no more. So since then, the trees are starting to slide down, everything. And the water from your plant across the road, I found a sinkhole on the road on the other side. I complained and complained and complained. I think that water is running underneath the ground, down in the ditch and washing. The tree was standing here. So people said the bank is sliding. Well, when something slides, the tree would fall over. But if the tree stays there and drops 4 feet, that means it's sinking. And how does it sink? There's water running underneath it. So basically your pipe from your outlet is in rough shape. You have to change it. If you let this go on a few years, you ever see Niagara Falls going over the water? That pipe runs 24 hours. A 10-inch pipe down 22 feet, right next to the barricade to the road. If that thing ever let loose, you know the big rocks that go over Niagara Falls? So all that dirt's gonna go out in the lake. And then that's, but anyway, I don't want to go on and on. Make me happy, pass it.
Councilor Van Passen, go ahead.
Let me shut that off.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could I put forth a motion to receive the deputation as information?
Perfect, thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Ed.
And could I put forth a motion to accept the staff recommendation as in report EIS 2207?
Can I just have one more question here for staff? I think you have full support around the council table to move forward with this. I've just got a couple other concerns. Does this actually, this is the report that I'm thinking of. This is where we're actually going to be doing some work out into the water, correct?
Yes.
So in terms of timelines, this is significant in the sense of how long do you have to actually do that work out into the water? Like this is pretty critical as it affects our wastewater outlet, correct?
It does, certainly, and through the chair. So in water time will take us from now up until next March. We have to complete this work within water. Otherwise, we have to move out, allow sensitive species to repopulate, and all that, and then you can get back in the water.
But you basically have to have it done, the work in the water during the one day. Basically, you start in the morning and it needs to be done by night because you've got to be able to open that up again, correct?
Yes, through the chair, absolutely. Considering it is our plant outfall, yes, we cannot, unfortunately, we cannot stop sewage from coming. So yes, it is a very short shutdown duration, but the schedule for in-water work, we do have some flexibility as long as we work within those regulated timelines. But yes, the shutdown would be.
And what are the contingency plans that are in place by staff on a project? Ed, don't worry, I'm supporting the project. I just want to make sure it goes off without a hitch. What are the contingency plans that are in place for a job that is this critical to be completed in such a short time frame? Because we don't have a great track record of completing things in short time frames.
So just conferring with staff behind me, so they will be submitting their work plan for us for approval to give us comfort that it can be done within the allotted time. Also, we talk to our staff about what we can do for emergency measures. In the past, on smaller types of facilities like this, we've been able to bring in trucks to help accommodate if we were to ever run into issues, and additional gen sets for temporary outlets. So that's stuff that would all be looked at as part of our mitigation plan.
So in terms of the 3 bids, were they all the same design? They were all exactly, so the seawall that was proposed on either side of the outlet?
Through the chair, my understanding is all designs were the same, yes.
And so then they exceeded the design recommendations by the consultant?
Through the chair, that is correct. The costing was significantly higher, and one of the rationales for that, as we mentioned, was the continued erosion of that bank. And then also our engineer was also on site with contractors looking at additional borehole information to look at soils. We do have some contaminated soils in the area that require trucking off site, and that's all part of why prices are higher than the original estimate.
So I just want to ask you one more time. Sorry, Andrew, I just want confirmation. So the design that was proposed and that is going to be completed by the successful bidder provides a wider seawall on either side of the outlet than was originally recommended by the design consultants. Can you confirm that for me?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Perfect. Okay, mover and seconder, Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Van Den Rishi. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? That's carried. Just for some final comments on that, I mean, this is, I think, a really significant project to be completed because of the short time frames, and I hope that we don't see, some disaster report that's coming back to council because it couldn't have been completed in that day. And I think that this has to be a top priority to ensuring that that design is actually going to work on the day that it's rolled out. Okay, so moving on. Now we're at 11.3.3, staff report EIS 22-077 regarding the service monitoring report, water and wastewater. And actually, could we just take a quick 5-minute break again, if that's okay for everyone? We'll just come back at 42 minutes after. I just want to chat to Bill Mays for 2 seconds before he leaves.
We will be going live in 12 seconds.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We are on now to staff reports, EIS 22-077, the service monitoring report, water and wastewater. Seems like just yesterday I heard the last one. Oh wait, that was 3.5 years ago.
Ouch. Too bad Ed left. I was going to let Ed introduce this report for me after he did his last one. So the service monitoring report is in front of you today to provide council an update on water and wastewater capacity in our systems. This report was last presented to committee in 2019, but is something that I really support coming forward on an annual basis. I think it provides visibility and transparency into our system for our customers as well as our development community. So something you'll see forward, or something you'll see come forward from us annually. Just as a brief reminder, we have 5 distinct water and wastewater systems in Norfolk County. We have Simcoe, Waterford, and Delhi that are all groundwater-based drinking water systems, and then Port Dover and Port Rowan are surface water systems drawing from Lake Erie. These systems are different in sizes, they leverage different technologies, but they do a great job providing water and wastewater services to our community. And then, of course, we have a large rural area that is not serviced through municipal needs. The report in front of you highlights that Simcoe, Waterford, and Delhi are doing very well from a water and wastewater capacity perspective. Ample capacity support committed and pending growth within these nodes. On the wastewater side, there's ongoing upgrades at both Simcoe and Waterford to replace aging assets and improve effluent quality, and this will take place over the next couple of years. On the water side, there's a new well under development in Simcoe that's planned for commissioning in 2025, and this will provide additional drinking water capacity. But overall, as I mentioned, these systems are operating quite well. So I'm going to focus more on the 2 other systems that are a little bit in the negative. So we also talk about Port Dover and Port Rowan. We know we have challenges there, as you were all aware. In Port Dover, a development moratorium was in place, and while staff are looking to increase capacity of that drinking water system, Phase 1 of these upgrades are complete, and Phase 2 is just nearing the tendering process right now. Construction in Port Dover for Phase 2 is scheduled to start in 2023 and take into 2024, and that will see an increase in capacity to 7,600 cubic meters per day, and that will accommodate our committed and pending growth within the area. However, recognizing the need to be open for business and the impact that this moratorium has had on the development community, we're exploring options to provide an interim increase in capacity that could be as early as early in 2023, and that will accommodate our committed as well as some of the pending growth while these other upgrades are underway. Provide more information about this once we have validated all of our findings and ensure that what we're proposing can meet regulatory requirements. Also in Port Dover, we have limited capacity on our wastewater side. There's a design that's complete for the expansion of the plant to 6,100 cubic meters per day, and that will accommodate our committed developments. But also due to some delays, this completion is now kind of closing in on a subsequent expansion to 7,500 cubic meters today. So we're validating as a team what the best path forward is to make sure that we can support the development community, but also benefiting from less construction as well as economies of scale. In Port Rowan, we have limited capacity in our drinking water system, and in June of 2021, developments were paused while we did a review of the system. Water quality upgrades were completed in 2021, and there's construction for expansion scheduled to start in 2023 that will see a significant increase of capacity to over 3,000 cubic meters per day there, and that will accommodate all pending and future growth. And then concurrently with these upgrades, we're planning to launch a leak detection program in Port Rowan in 2023. This was brought up a few council meetings ago by Councillor Michelli, talking about the high non-revenue water that we have in that system. We see that as a big opportunity to also, well, one, save money, but also increase availability for development needs in that area. Then on top of all of this, we have embarked on the interurban water project, which will supplement all of our drinking water supply for our community. We've started the EA for Phase 1, that's the Townsend to Simcoe link, and we're working with Haldeman to finalize our agreements for the plant. If all goes well, we'll see 10,000 cubic meters supplied to Simcoe in 2026 with a connection to Port Dover to follow shortly thereafter. And this will allow for us to move water into our system, and we can move it to where we see the biggest needs and demands within our system. In addition, there's an additional 15,000 cubic meters per day planned for Norfolk County through the Haldeman Supply by 2031. But it is important to note that a project of this magnitude and complexity takes some time to deliver, and these are targets at this point, and certainly something we'll keep council up to speed on as we move forward, but this is a monumental undertaking for a municipality. I realize that is a very long introduction with a lot of numbers, but we have our team here to answer any questions. We also work very closely with Brandon and his team on this as the link to the development community. So with that, we'll do our best to answer any questions that you may have.
Councillor Columbus, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, are there any developments where allocation to water has been made, but perhaps they're not going to be going forward and that allotment that was put there could go to somebody else?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I didn't quite catch your question.
His question related to whether if somebody hasn't, basically we were talking about a policy for the use it or lose it in terms of committed capacity.
So through the chair, that is something that we're reviewing as a group right now. A capacity allocation document does exist, but we're looking to update that. Yes, really following the use it or lose it mentality, holding on to capacity for something that may never happen does impact other communities. I don't know if you can particular, Brendan, that are on the docket right now, but that is certainly something we're looking at as a group together.
Sorry, through the mayor to help supplement that, and I know Mr. King is the overseer of this and could chime in as well, but my understanding is all of the committed developments are, if they're actually formally committed, they are good to go, except for in Port Dover, of course. And so anything that's been committed is at that stage of an agreement. So you have to review in the development agreement whether or not there's anything about use it or lose it. However, as Mr. Grice indicated, we are looking at updating our policy and our procedures that we would further put that into our agreements. So that's coming.
So that was a policy that we discussed as coming forward to this council actually back when Jason was here. And I do think especially even as we look to our new official plan, it's important to have that. I mean, it's been a couple of years this has been talked about, but it's important to have that in place as we've seen so many areas where this could potentially impact that.
To the mayor, we have been, as Mr. Grice indicated, working together, ENIS and community development, on any updated policy. We do have an existing allocation policy to follow. We needed step one. Step one is this monitoring report because we haven't had it in 3 years. So we needed to have the firm numbers of here's what we have available, here's what we have committed. And now we're going to have to take some steps. So obviously there's steps being taken for Port Dover. We're going to have to look at another community, and then moving forward, as the mayor indicated, there's a lot more growth proposed into the future. So we need to make sure we're well positioned for that.
So committed, but what is the time frame that we go by? Or does it vary across the county in various developments?
Through the chair, committed in our current practice means that it's at the registration of agreement stage. So the subdivision agreement or the site plan agreement is being registered. We're entering into this development agreement between Norfolk County and the developer. We are committing you X meters cubed per day of water and wastewater at that time. And at that stage, they are getting ready to construct. Currently, the current process is, then they're off with their engineering clearances, then they're off building, and then they go to building permits. So it's generally later in the process. So it's not being committed up front right now.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. Through you. My question was in regards to the information we have on users that are on cisterns. And I just wanted some confirmation of the timelines and how we're prioritizing that. I do see that it's going to, we'll likely be able to get some of these users off of cisterns beginning in 2023. Looks like a substantial completion date is about mid 2024. But in terms of prioritizing, assisting our residents in getting off of the cistern and connecting to municipal services, we're prioritizing freeholds. How does it work with agreements of condominium and subdivision? How do we start assisting? I guess I'm interested in helping out the individual resident, but perhaps we're not able to prioritize a whole row of townhouses, for example. And I'm just looking for information as to those residents on cistern, when could they expect priority queuing? When could they expect to no longer be reliant on their cistern that they've installed?
So through the chair, the individuals that are currently on cistern, they're going to be at the top of our list. So as you mentioned, the longer term project is looking into 2024, but we're optimistic that we will have interim increase in capacity. And the ones that are already on a cistern, certainly, because it represents a relatively small volume for us, we can accommodate within that early interim capacity that we would have available.
Councilmember Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am glad to see this report. I'm glad to see that they are going to be bringing one every year. I'm glad to see they're recognizing that the capacity for water and the capacity for wastewater somehow need to match pretty closely rather than having an extreme amount of water available but nowhere to put it. But the one question I get asked the most is concerns Port Dover, and I'm wondering if you could go sort of through what is currently being updated, constructed, and when you're done explaining that, then I will have to ask Mr. Sloan the other question about when can developers start bringing planning applications and when can they start asking for building permits?
Sure. So through the chair, as you mentioned, this is certainly about both water and wastewater. So on the waterfront in Port Dover, we have already commissioned or substantially complete phase 1 of these upgrades. I'm just going to flip through my notes so that I don't say anything incorrectly here. Phase 1 included the installation of dissolved air flotation units. And we've also supplemented that with our temporary membrane plant there to make sure that we continue to provide drinking water to the community. Phase 2 is the big increase in capacity that we're going to see. That's going to include us adding the filtration process to those newly installed dissolved flotation units, a new UV system, standby power, a new holding tank, pump station, as well as upgrades and modifications to both the low and high lift pumps. So that's what's planned for work at the Port Dover water treatment plant. At the wastewater plant, we're just finalizing the design there right now. I'm getting ready to go to tender. As I mentioned, that would be a multi-phase upgrade as currently scheduled. So those are expansions. So there will be some replacement of aging assets, but also it is focused on increasing the capacity of that plant. So additional tankage so that we can treat additional volumes of water to support development. One of the things that we are looking at right now is the multi-phased approach. This project at the wastewater plant has been delayed a number of years, and right now we're asking some good questions about what is the best path forward. Is it to re-look at that design and build now to the full 7,500 cubic meter design capacity, or does it still make sense to do a multi-phased approach? But both of those projects are geared at increase in tankage and treatment process to accommodate growth.
Councilor Martin.
Thanks through you, Mayor Chop, to staff. If I could bounce back to the allocation policy that we have. I'm specifically wondering in broad terms how that works. Probably a first come first served basis through developments that have been submitted to the planning department to gain capacity. But I'm wondering if there are any specific and special considerations given to projects that in particular, I'm thinking about the long-term care facility that's been in discussions with the county in Port Dover. So can you comment on those?
Sure, through the chair, I'll kick that over to Brandon, but certainly it's something we've been talking about. There is different methodologies employed by different communities out there, but Brandon's certainly up to speed on our current process.
Through the chair. So community development's been working with ENIS on the existing policy and how that would be utilized if we needed to use it in a situation, and then any revisions to that policy that might be needed. And so we're doing some test case as we work on that policy piece. The existing policy would kick in if we have a scenario where there are more pending developments that need more capacity than what is existing. And so far, the good news that we have with this report is Simcoe doesn't have that situation. We may have 1 or 2 communities that have that situation. When doing that, there are criteria beyond just who's in first. So there is a list within that policy, and we can provide additional information if needed, but it does get at items such as the mix of housing types. You know, are there, how ready are they through their development process? Are they kind of meeting any master plans, or maybe there's something about complete communities or employment that's important for it. I believe there's, I should know this, 8 criteria. And then there's another one after that, whether or not any of the developments, if there's a crunch, could any of the developments be phased? I can't say directly to your question. That is something that has been under consideration when we've been working on any draft updates to the new policy. As it relates to what does it mean about affordable housing or long-term care or even major employers? How do those get factored in to the criteria? So we haven't necessarily had to use the policy so far to date. If I may, I'll quickly jump back to Councillor Van Passen's question, if that's all right, about Port Dover and development applications. So since the internal control bylaws expired, and council has an approved plan to move forward to get the needed infrastructure in place, and then eventually development would happen. Development applications in Port Dover can and have reactivated, and they can move partway through the process. So we do have files that were dormant that are now coming back, or new applications, new subdivisions that are coming forward, and they can move through the development application process, which takes a little bit of time up to a certain point. And again, we talk about the agreement. When we get to the agreement, we need to see where we at relative. And what I've been indicating for a long time is, do we have a tendered project that is increasing and changing the capacity? And if we do, then we have a better marker of how far you can move through that process from the agreement to registration, or when building permits could happen. I think that's what we're hearing today, is a bit of the update on that project. So applications have reinitiated, but only up to a certain point. They can't build yet, obviously, until there's water.
And does that start our timeline concerning our requirement to make a decision?
Through the chair, technically, yes. However, most of these have a holding provision on them, or what would happen is if a subdivision came forward with its rezoning, we would be putting a holding provision on, and the holding provision states that you can't necessarily do anything until such time as water or wastewater is allocated and committed. So they can still do their application, get in and get a preliminary decision, but it's going to be subject to this holding.
Okay, thank you. My last question would just be.
Sorry, Councilor Martin, can I interrupt? What did you had some question about the long-term care facility though, specifically?
Concerning allocation and the current policy versus the new draft policy, how staff are going to take into consideration.
But in the context of Dover Cliffs, council actually overruled that, and we said that if they sterilized Dover Cliffs, that they would be allowed to continue. That actually came before council. It might have been before your time, Brandon. I'm not sure. What's that?
My last question through you, Mayor Chop, to staff is, or maybe it's just a comment, and I'm sure you're very well aware of this, but there are a few locations in Port Dover that have 1 or 2 lots pending to close down that entire subdivision and make those upgrades to the road and so on that the developer would finish off in a particular condo corporation. I would hope that also when we look, if the developer has chosen to not build and not add a cistern to close those lots down, I would hope that that's also worked into the policy or the new draft policy, because I think there's a considerable amount of community members that are living in a development construction zone that it's been a long time coming. Thanks.
So to that end, though, the developer would already be in line for allocation in that case.
To the
That's not-
chair and.
I don't think that needs to be in the policy.
Yeah, that's correct. So once there's capacity, there's, as Councillor Martin indicated, there's some subdivisions that have 1 or 2 lots remaining and they've chosen, or in the past were not approved or didn't do cisterns. Once there's capacity and they're already registered plans, then
They're already registered.
they're already in the queue, we'll call it. I think cisterns might be a little bit prior to that.
So sorry, when we're talking about allocating additional capacity then, that's concerning the new developments that are coming in and given the holding provision only. In this particular situation where I just talked about the subdivision, they have water. As soon as we turn the taps on and give them the okay, they can go and finish off where they left off. This is just holding provisions on new.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, so
And
those
for-
are not first come, first served.
Yeah, and for Port Dover,
Okay.
the infrastructure project, not the ultimate, but the infrastructure project that's going to produce the capacity is going to be enough for many, many years and for the pending development that we currently have on the books. So we would not necessarily need to use the policy to prioritize at this point in time. We're still going to be keeping our eye on the future. Nobody wants to get into this scenario again.
Any further questions from council? Councilor Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to staff. Brandon, there are, according to the report, 3 pending developments in Port Rowan. Are they at the same stage as those in Port Dover where they can at least begin the process and get to the point where they will then be pending?
Through the chair to the councillor, my understanding is the pending ones in Port Rowan are partway through the process. However, that is a scenario where we need to, one, we cannot go to the agreement stage at this point, my understanding, to fully confirm, commit to the capacity today, because as you can see the chart, it's not there. But there is a project that is underway for Port Rowan. So now it's a timing matter. So we may need to proceed and do something to identify the short-term future of Port Rowan development as it relates to the timing of the infrastructure project underway. So I would suggest that this report is step 1, and then we will have to come back to council with step 2. Which is a plan for Port Rowan in the interim.
Thank you, Brandon.
I just have one question in terms of the Port Dover figure. What is the additional capacity then, Mariana, that has been brought on with the DAF units didn't provide any additional capacity? The number is significantly different than it was previous, so I'm just wondering how we got to that.
To you, Madam Mayor. Phase 1 of Port Dover upgrades will produce 4,900 cubic meters a day. However, that upgrade is now in substantially complete stage.
Sorry, the first phase produced how much?
4,900 cubic meters a day. However, is not operational on its own. It needs the filtering capacity that is yet to be built after the DAF units will be finally tested and commissioned by our environmental services team.
I just want to know, how did we go from the calculation of 2,400 cubic meters in our last servicing report 3.5-4 years ago?
Yes, I've seen
To
that,
the
yeah.
40, whatever it was, 4,200 now? How did we add on that additional 1,800? Is that?
The capacity of the DAF unit is for full plant capacity. However, the high lift pumps and the low lift pumps that are currently at the plant, along with the disinfection process, cannot serve 7,600 cubic meters a day. The 2,500 cubic meters a day was the capacity that could have been produced with the plant prior to starting the upgrades. And I think Mike is on the line and he can elaborate on that. Mike?
Where
Yes,
are you at, Mr. King? That's pretty fancy.
I'm at home actually, Mayor.
You got me.
Yes, to answer my question, I think you're talking about the previous servicing monitoring report, which showed 2820 for Dover. What we're showing now for the 4200 is the current operational capacity of the portable membrane that we have.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
It's the temporary membrane. That's gotcha.
Yes, right. Thank you.
So if I can just follow up on that question then. So when we made the decision to, because Haldeman only had a couple thousand cubic meters that they could give us off the get-go, that was why we made the decision to take that amount and route it to Simcoe first, as opposed to bringing it to Dover, because it wasn't going to provide enough additional capacity in Dover from that original figure, the 20, I thought it was 24, but if you say it's 2,800. In that case, is it just that temporary membrane is not, you know, a 5-year solution? Is that the challenge there? Like if we had taken that 2,000 cubic meters a day and added it onto the 4,200 cubic meters that you're now claiming with the temporary membrane, that presents a different scenario than what we've been talking about. Do you want me to rephrase that one more time? So initially we were talking about routing water from Anacoke to Port Dover. But because of the limitations with the volume that was available to us from Haldeman initially, the argument was that it was only going to get Port Dover to where we should have been and didn't provide that additional capacity for growth, which is why council voted to fund upgrades to the Port Dover facility and choosing first to run the line then from Townsend to Simcoe to provide that capacity that Haldeman was able to provide us and route that over to Simcoe to begin with. That was why I made that decision. Now, when I see this and I see Port Dover sitting at 4,200, I'm wondering why that decision, I'm just not as confident in that initial decision then to have, we can't go back on it, but why we wouldn't have brought in the additional couple thousand cubic meters there. But, or is it that temporary membrane solution is just not a long-term viable solution? And by long-term, I mean more long-term in the context of needing upgrades like 5 years.
Okay, I can certainly start and maybe Andrew will want to add on afterwards. I believe when we were looking at bringing in the water from Haldeman in 2019 or 2020, we were looking at the number for Dover, which was 2,800. You are right, that was in the previous servicing monitoring report. So adding the additional 2,000 still wouldn't, you know, it still wouldn't bring us out of the hole. So we had to look at alternative phase 1 upgrades for Dover and subsequent upgrade that we're going to start now for phase number 2. So once we get up to the 7,600, what we're actually projecting through growth, that would be a number that will service us into the year at least 2031.
Okay, so again, let me just rephrase that. So as opposed to the next stage where we're heading into with the lift pump modifications to provide that additional. So we're sitting at 4,200. The lift pumps are going to get us to, what was it, 7,600, I think I read? Is that correct? So the temporary membrane got us up from the 2,800 to 4,200. The lift pumps take us from 4,200 to 7,600. I'm just wondering why with the temporary membrane that put us at 4,200, why the additional 2,000 wouldn't have got us that additional capacity then? Or is it that the lift pumps would still have to have been done?
The operational, at the plant, the operational actually issues would be the contact time that we have right now. So how the plant is operating right now, the contact time that we need for primary disinfection, we can only do a maximum 5,500 per day. So we still need the upgrade for the UVs, so we can be up to the actual 7,600. And the second part, I think, of the second part that you asked was regarding bringing water in from Haldeman. I think staff at the time looked at what would be the fastest. Like, I know we could probably bring in water from Haldeman within 3 years or 4 years. However, I think at the time staff was thinking if we go through the phase 1 and phase 2 upgrades, they could be online before we could bring in water from Haldeman.
I guess my concern, I just want to stay confident in the decision that we made, which is that we're putting money, the ratepayers are having to pay for upgrades to a plant in Port Dover that, let's face it, when we are ultimately connected, hopefully one day, all being serviced out of Nanticoke, those upgrades will be redundant. Right? So the argument initially was that the capacity that Haldeman had to give us, that was the argument from staff back then, was that on top of the 2,800 was not enough to provide us additional capacity for growth. And that's why we were told we should expend those funds from the ratepayers to be able to add that additional capacity to Port Dover. I'm just surprised to see that we've gone from the 2,800 to the 4,200 as an interim before getting to the 7,600 cubic meters. But we can, I don't know, Marianne, if you had anything else, or we can chat another time. I was pretty surprised to see that figure, to be honest.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to add to what Mr. King just explained to us in terms of upgrades, I like to bring forward the fact that Haldeman didn't really have the capacity of 25,000 cubic meters per day that were available at the time of those discussions 3.5 years ago. And that is documented in the rerating study that Haldeman completed recently, and is an attachment to the Agreement Council report we discussed back in June. So whether even if the pumps, the high lift pumps and the temporary membrane plant were available at the time, and we could have brought our water, that would have been a perfect solution, but Haldeman didn't have that water, so we had to go full 7,600 cubic meters per day upgrades at the plant. I'm not sure that if that's clear enough.
That's okay. Well,
Haldeman capacity is no longer available after the re-rating because there is no backup capacity at the plant according to the MOECC report.
Okay, I might bug you with a few questions afterwards. Please, any other questions from council members on this? All right, seeing none, then if I could have a mover and seconder to move staff's recommendation. Councillor Columbus, thanks. Seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That's carried. Moving on to staff report CS 22-152, the property sale update for Part Tolman Street in Delhi, Russet Street, Delhi, and Park Lane, Simcoe. Kathy, I believe you're presenting this report. Lydia, are you online with us?
I don't see Lydia online.
Okay. 1 moment, please. No. Through the chair to members of council, my apology for that. I thought Lydia was going to be at the meeting to present the report. This information memo is just to let council know about the sale of the Tolman Street and Russet Drive, Delhi, and Part Lane Road, or Part Lane Simcoe to the adjacent sale to the adjacent owners. The information is contained within the report, and we're just is based on the request that council requires us to provide an information memo as a result of negotiations. If council has any specific questions.
Sounds like a good news story. Mover and seconder for staff's recommendation. Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Michelle. All those in favor? Thanks very much. And with that, we are moving on to bylaws, and I'm going to turn it over to Teresa.
Thank you, through the mayor. So there will be two motions coming out of bylaws with respect to events that happened today. So the first one is a motion that the following bylaws be approved, signed by the mayor and clerk and affixed with the corporate seal. So that bylaws 7 OP 2022, 9 OP 2022, 25Z 2022 to 29Z 2022 inclusive, 31Z 2022, bylaws 2022-67 to 2022-70 inclusive, bylaws 2022-72 to 77 inclusive, bylaw 2022-79, bylaws 2022-81 to 2022-92 inclusive, and bylaws 2022-96 to 2022-101 inclusive.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Rabbit, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That's carried. Sorry, Councillor Van Pat, did you have a question?
Just to verify with the clerk to make sure, because we deferred that one item, that's why we're skipping some, because those bylaws have been pulled. Thank you.
And next round.
And then the next motion that I need is that bylaw 8 OP 2022 and bylaw 30-Z 2022 be deferred to the October 5th, 2022 council meeting.
Mover and seconder. Councillor Van Rishi, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Teresa. Any notices of motion from council? Any general announcements? Councillor Columbus, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just wanted to report that on Saturday, there was a dedication ceremony held at the Delhi Public Library in memory of Teresa Vandenbush. It's a memorial reading garden, and there's a number of benches there for patrons to sit at. And it's a lovely addition to the back of the Delhi Library. We thank Vandenbush family for sharing and making this project happen. Thank you. The other thing behind you, there's the Queen behind you, and I just wondered if there's any movement by Mr. Menzies. Maybe you could answer this, when that photograph is going to change to the King Charles.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we are working on that right now, and we're hoping to have that updated shortly.
Councillor Van Rishi, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. A couple of things. We have the Langton Fair, which is going to be tomorrow, so you're all invited. The second thing is the Colford family has the project that was at the former research station, and there people have been coming in, and they have moved in for there and are very pleased with it. And I'd like to commend them for the job well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Rishi. Anything further from anyone else? Right. In that case, I will need a motion to move into closed session at 3:23 p.m. to discuss the following three items: 16.1 staff report CAO 22 C13, which is confidential report, the negotiated settlement between the Corporation of Norfolk County and the Ontario Nurses Association for the term January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2025. 16.2, the OLT appeals, severance application 887 Norfolk County Road 19 East. That is files BNPL 2022090 and BNPL 2022091. And 16.3, the development charges exemption legal advice, and that will be a verbal update provided by our CAO. So pursuant to sections 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to D, labor relations or employee negotiations, E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Moved by Councillor Rabbit, seconded by Councillor Michelle. All those in favor? That's carried.
Just for the record, Mayor Chop left the meeting and passed the chair over to Councillor Van Passen during closed session.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The first motion would be to return to open session. Mover, Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Van Der Schie, all in favor? That is carried. And I will allow the clerk to read the motions that were coming out of closed.
Thank you through the chair. So we will need a mover and a seconder for the following motion. That staff report CAO 22C13 negotiated settlement between the Corporation of Norfolk County and the Ontario Nurses Association Local 007 for the term January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2025 be received as information, and that a bylaw be passed authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign the collective agreement on behalf of the Corporation of Norfolk County.
That was moved by Councillor Michelle, seconded by Councillor Huffman. Any discussion? All in favor? That is carried.
And through the chair, for items 16.2 and 16.3, staff were provided direction in closed session.
So that completes that.
I can reread the confirming bylaw if you'd like.
The next issue of their confirming bylaw. We have a mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Columbus seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? That is carried. And now would be looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Huffman, surprised, it's me, and Councillor Taylor. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone, for